What if I was to tell you there is a secret combination of settings that will instantly make it easier for you to hit your shots and increase your in-game awareness? I'm not kidding, this isn't clickbait, and all of the top competitive Apex players are already using it. Let's get into it. Hi everyone, my name is Samson. I've been playing FPS games on PC and console for more than a decade. Whenever I start playing a new game, I want to do well. I've never been the type to consistently destroy lobbies, but I always try to reach the top 10% or so of all players, and I've managed to do that many times in many different games. One of my secrets is that I never try to rediscover the wheel. Let me tell you what I mean. Being successful in any competitive endeavor comes down to passion, practice, and knowledge. I am ultimately a casual player in the sense that I can only dedicate a couple of hours a day to whichever game I'm trying to conquer at any given time. This means that I'm always looking for different ways to increase the effectiveness of the time for practice that I do have. I want to spend the least amount of time possible figuring out things that more experienced players have already figured out. While there is no way to shortcut the practice you need in order to develop your skills, what you can do is take all the best practices that are already established by the players who do this for a living and use them. They have a huge incentive to figure out every aspect of the game and find what works best. In the case of Apex Legends, I'm talking about field of view and sensitivity, but more on that later. While it might feel unoriginal, I believe the single biggest shortcut you could employ to jumpstart your improvement in any game is to imitate the pro players who are already great. As you spend more time playing and practicing, you will slowly start to understand the logic behind each of their habits, strategies, and actions. That is when you can improvise and devise a more original playstyle. What can you copy from the top players? You can look into the legends they prefer to play, especially in a competitive setting. You can look into their favorite loadouts and favorite places to drop. And of course, you can look into their in-game settings. Trust me, every person who feels serious about reaching the top of their abilities in an FPS game is going to find the optimal settings that will give them the most advantage, either through experience or as advice from other top players. So I decided to do some research. I looked into the settings of more than 100 competitive players and streamers playing Apex Legends, and boy was I surprised to find out how much of a consensus there is when it comes to two types of settings. Mouse sensitivity is an extremely important setting in any first-person shooter, and Apex is no exception. If your sensitivity is too high, you have a hard time hitting shots. If it is too low, you have a hard time switching targets rapidly, flicking, and moving around in general. If you've played Apex for more than a couple of minutes, you probably realize that movement is very important here. Your choice of sensitivity reflects the playstyle you prefer, as well as your mouse grip and aiming style. In some shooters like CSGO, there is an extremely wide range of sensitivity settings that are used by top players. So I wasn't all that surprised when I looked into the DPI setting most pros prefer, and it was all over the place. There are players that run 400 and there are players going as high as 1800. DPI is a setting you have access to with every decently new gaming mouse. It affects the speed with which the mouse moves. It is, however, only one half of the whole picture when it comes down to mouse sensitivity. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. There's a lot more like it on the way. The other half of the equation is of course your in-game sensitivity. In Apex Legends, you can set your sensitivity in increments of 0.1. It starts at 0.2 and goes all the way up to 20. Here, the story repeats itself. The lowest I saw was 0.4 and the highest I saw was 6.3. What did we learn? Should you play with whatever sensitivity you feel like playing? No. There is in fact a way to understand these numbers in a deeper, more meaningful way. It's called effective DPI, or EDPI for short. What you do is you multiply the DPI setting by the in-game sensitivity for a player, and you come up with a number that allows you to compare the real sensitivity for two or more different players without getting confused. I found out that most players fall within a range. They use different DPIs, but there are very few players going under 900 and there are very few players going over 1600. The average DPI is 1251. My personal settings at the moment are 800 DPI and 1.7 in-game sensitivity, which results in a personal EDPI of 1360. By the way, I'm running the same settings as No Cocoa Puffs, so if you enjoy him, try them. When you pick your sensitivity, I would strongly recommend that you try something in the average range. Start with 1250. If you feel it's not enough, adjust it by increments of 100 in the direction you need to. Most players should feel comfortable in the range between 900 and 1600. By most players, I mean like literally 75% of people or more. 2 out of 3 pros and streamers play with an eDPI in that range. So if you're over 1600, you probably have your setting too high, and if you're under 900, you probably have your setting too low. You will know this based on how you perform in aim trainers or just going in the firing range. You can try to switch targets quickly and see. From my experience, veteran players from other FPSs, let's say CSGO or other older games, tend to have sensitivity that is too low for Apex. And newer players in general play with sensitivity which is way too high. Like I've literally had people in my chat on the stream talk to me about different tips in playing, and just randomly I discovered they have eDPI over 3000, and I'm like, dude, you need to fix that first. You're not gonna hit any shots with that sensitivity. The second setting with extreme in-game implications is of course the field of view. A regular person has an approximate field of view of 160 degrees. Due to the fact that we are looking at the screen, this will be different for any game. Most modern shooters allow for the player to pick a different setting. In Apex Legends, you can go as low as 70 and as high as 110. By the way, you can go to 120 with some workarounds. Here's a link to the video. The default setting for PC is 90, and from some friends I've heard it's 70 for consoles. However, there are very few top players that stick with it. More than 2/3 of all competitive Apex players and top streamers have it set at the maximum setting, and less than 10% have a field of view less than 100 degrees. If you want to steal some skill fast without practicing or anything, switch your field of view. Go higher. If you're already at 70, 80 or 90, go to 100. Once you get used to it, I personally recommend that you switch to 110. I still haven't gotten the experience to switch to 120, but I'm also considering it. There's a whole bunch of implications for the game when you change your field of view. The most obvious one is that you see more. As you adjust your field of view up, more and more of the battlefield will be displayed on your screen. In order to accommodate this, the game settings will apply a slight distortion to your screen. It's also called the fisheye effect. If you're experienced with photography or videography, this will be nothing new to you. There is one interesting consequence from the change in your field of view. Your opponents will appear slightly smaller, or if you want to look at it like that, they would seem like they're further away. But as a trade-off, they would be much easier to track. For example, if you have to move your mouse 4 centimeters when you're running a field of view of 90, then you would have to move it less than 3 centimeters in order to track the same target. For me, tracking targets has been one of the biggest challenges in improving in Apex Legends. The other FPS games I've spent the most time in have a very fast time to kill. In CSGO and Valorant, you could wipe an entire team with only 5 bullets if all of them hit headshots. In Apex Legends, individual hits generally don't count for much, so you really need to have some excellent tracking if you want to finish people fast before they get to heal. In summary, increase your field of view as much as you can. I recommend going to 110. Pick an eDPI close to 1250. If you feel uncomfortable with it, increase it or decrease it. Don't go under 900, don't go over 1600. If you do all of this, you will see instant improvements, possibly even the same day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.